Alright, this is the time for us to tread through dangerous waters. I'm about to take you an array of strategical and tactical lines. The player's choice among these lines will depend on the following: personal style, tools to confront different types of opponents, while mixing elements of Queen's Gambit and the Slav defense. Black aims for robust development, while keeping options for tactical counterplay. Take a look at this position. You're playing the black side. Things that you need to be aware of is possibilities such as D takes E6, the pawn on D5 takes the pawn on E6, and if you recapture, then white could follow up with pawn on F6 to F7, which will open up the bishop to take your rook on D8. Another possibility is knight A4. But consider this. In this position, B4 is played. Or the knight hits your queen. So where are you going to move your queen? Are you going to place the queen on A6, A5, B5, or C7? Are you comfortable playing these types of positions? Consider this position. You're playing black. What do you think your immediate response should be? White just played the bishop to E3 from G5 to E3. What should black do? Looking at this position, I would say that a good move for black here would be to hop the knight to D3 for a post, followed up by rook over to D8. The bishops would be traded off. One line goes knight D3. Bishop takes C5. Queen takes C5 check, and after king H1, rook over to D8. Here's one final example before we get into the meat of the lesson. If your strategy is to go to an early endgame and you plan to bring your king out early, then make sure you trade queens first. Here's a short excerpt from one of my previous videos entitled Fighting Chess.
Look at my wrist, wrist like 10, yeah. Look at my feet, rocking with Vans, rocking my bands, got in the chain zone. Look at them dance, yeah. Look at them dance, yeah. Look at my neck, neck about 10, yeah. Look at my feet, rocking with Vans, rocking my bands, got in the chain zone. Look at the dance, yeah. Look at the dance, yeah. Look at the dance, yeah. Look at the dance, ooh. Jump a bass, yeah. Jump with a bass, ooh. Move my dance, order my dance, number dance, condona has, ooh. Never advance, out of the vans, horse to the desk, ooh. All of my gangs too, but in the vans, no romance, ooh. Shit about mace, making it rain, bust down, pill, up the A. cruising down in my Lambo, ayy. Buzz it down with a bar, ayy. Buzz it down with a bar, ayy. Look at my wrist, wrist of a 10, yeah. Look at my feet, rockin' with Vans, rockin' my bands, got in the chain zone. Look at the dance, yeah. Look at the dance, yeah. Look at my neck, neck of a 10, yeah. Look at my feet, rockin' with Vans, rockin' my bands, got in the chain zone. Look at the dance, yeah. Look at the dance, yeah. Look at the dance, yeah.
The two moves that we're going to focus on here for black are C6 and D5. C6 is the Slav move order. Now, what do we want to do as black? We want to attack. Ready for a complex middle game. So after C6 and E6 followed by D5, white plays knight to C3. As black, the idea is to gain a pawn and free development. Now white gets the two bishops for compensation. Here, black gets to put his triangle system to the test. The threat is to capture on E4. Therefore, white plays knight to C3. And D takes E4. Knight takes E4. And what do you think the next move should be? There are two responses here for white, and they are bishop D2 and knight C3. After reaching this position, it resembles a Nemzo Indian defense. The difference is that C6 has been played in this position, but the bishop on B4 pins the knight. That's why it is good to know your middle game positions, or at least the plan for the middle game, and it helps to know the end game. Now let me give you an example. Here's a game, a little miniature game, using the triangle system for black. The first thing I'm going to do is start with the post middle game, end game, or it's about to go into an end game. But in this position, the game for black is won. It is black to move. How do you continue? One of the goals was to control the E4 square. The other thing that you do as black is to advance the queenside pawns. You want to open up fouls. The queen plays along the D8 to A5 diagonal. So, therefore, knight E4 gains tempo on white's queen. Queen moves. Now the A file will be open. Check. King B1. Battery along the A file. Now, starting from this position, notice that white doesn't have a knight on c3 to guard the e4 square. So therefore, bishop c4, e3. Bishop takes f1, rook on h takes f1. Same plan, a5 to open up a file. King c2, knight e4, gaining tempo. Queen d4, a takes b4, a takes b4, and rook a2 check. King d3, queen a8, and if rook c1, rook d2 is checkmate. Now, let's examine wild tactical lines, sharp gambits that have unique strategies. In the last example, black played c6. Here, the move that black plays is d5. And after c4, c6. The difference here is that d5 has been played, making the move e2 to e4 harder to play. So therefore, after knight c3, e6. This leads to a gambit known as the Marshall Gambit. It consists of sharp play and complex middle game positions. Or it can even lead to the note boom variation. And only now does white play the pawn to e4, and now d takes e4, knight takes e4, bishop b4 check. This is the Marshall Gambit. Bishop to d2, and now queen takes d4. Bishop takes b4, queen takes e4 check. White has the two bishops. Black's got the extra pawn. And now after bishop e2, knight to a6. Bishop a5, b6, queen to d6. So we're looking at this. This is very sharp and tactical. This is the tactical line here. Bishop to d7. I believe that the threat was if the pawn on b6 takes the bishop here on a5, then the idea is playing bishop to e2. Bishop to f3. Bishop on e2 to f3, which would attack the queen, and the rook on a8 will fall. So anyway, bishop to d7, and now bishop c3, f6, knight f3, knight f7. Sharp and tactical. Knight to d2, hitting the queen, and now queen takes g2. Check, in between move. Knight f7. Now, you may pause the video and take the move back to this position. Black is getting ready to play his fifth move. So this is move 5 for black. The knight just captured the pawn on e4, and now knight f6 is the other move instead of bishop b4 check. So knight f6. Now this is strategical. The idea is that after the recapture, let's say the knight takes f6, queen recaptures on f6 with the idea of playing knight a6 to play along these dark squares with the queen on f6. So let's take a look at it. So after d takes e4, knight takes e4, and now knight f6. And now knight takes f6, check. Queen takes f6, knight f3, and bishop b4 check. Now, and after the trade of bishops, c5, sacrificing the pawn on c5, and knight a6. So black is now attacking this pawn, controlling this square, and the queen is playing along there. So c6, bc, and castle, castle, opposite wing castling. Queen to d4, rook to b8. So while white plans to attack black's king side, black plans to attack on white's queen side. And now the note boom variation. Now I will introduce to you some lines that you need to practice. This part of the video illustrates tactical themes, including dynamics and central tension. I hope you keep your notes handy. You may use your physical chessboard and pieces to follow me. d4, d5, c4, and now c6. And after knight c3, e6. Knight f3. The note boom variation leads to exciting games with opportunity for both sides. After d takes c4, and now e3, b5, a4. Now let's go back. Now knight f3, starting from this position after knight f3, the pawn on d takes c4. And after d takes c4, this begins the topic of dynamics and central tension, but with an emphasis on the power of pawns and piece play. E3, B5. What makes the pawns so effective is their ability to affect the mobility of other pieces. A4, bishop B4, bishop D2 to break the pin. A5, A takes B5 in order for black to keep the pawn. Bishop takes C3. This is known as removing the defender, and in this case, the defender of the pawn on B5. Bishop takes C3, and now C takes B5. White plays B3. Now this dynamic pawn push to B3 highlights the X-ray that the rook on A1 has on the black rook on A8. Bishop B7 is played, but what happens if B4 is played then? If B4 is played, the bishop on C3 can just capture the pawn, and black will not be able to recapture without losing the rook on A8. So, going back, the move is bishop B7. And now, bishop to B2. The other move is advancing the pawn to D5. We're going to take a look at both moves. White has D5 and bishop to B2. Let's look at D5 first. Now this advance of the D pawn illustrates two tactical themes. The first theme is known as the jettison. White jettisons the pawn, making it appear that white is giving away a pawn for free. But if you look closer, you will see that the pawn isn't really free. The correct reply is knight f6. But what happens if the pawn is accepted? If bishop takes d5, then bishop takes g7, and the rook on h8 is lost. The pawn moving to d5 can also be called a clearance sacrifice to clear the bishop's range on c3. It could be called a clearance sacrifice. d5, and the move is knight f6. And after b takes c4, then b4. And now bishop takes f6, queen takes f6, queen a4 check, knight d7. Why are knights so effective? What makes the knight so effective is its defensive capacity. For example, knight d4. With this move, white creates more central tension. And queen e7, Queen b5. The bishop on b7 is under attack. Rook b8. Now, rook takes a5 is an experimental queen sacrifice by white. Now, if you want to explore this line, you can do so later. But it goes bishop takes d5, c takes d5, and rook takes b5, bishop takes b5, and black castles. Now, let's go back. d5 and bishop b2 are the two main moves for white here. Now we're going to take a look at bishop to b2. And the line continues. Knight f6, b takes c4, and now b4. Bishop d3, bishop b4. Castle, bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, and castle. Queen c2, queen c7, rook on f to c1, rook d8, knight d2. Now here, there are two tries for white, either e4 or f4. Now in view of this, black jettisons the e-pawn as a counter strategy. Let's take a look. e5, giving the pawn back temporarily. D takes e5, and now knight on f to d7. c5, knight takes e5. Bishop takes e5, queen takes e5. c6, rook c8, knight f3, hitting the queen. Queen e8. Knight d4. Now black wants to get rid of that pawn that's on the 6th rank, so offers another pawn to white, and if queen takes the pawn, knight takes c6. Now both sides have equal chances.